I know I shouldn't be writing this all down, but I just need to get it out there. Get it off my chest so I can try to move on with my life. But where do I even begin? I guess it starts with that nightmare. That damn nightmare that's been plaguing me over and over again for weeks. It always starts the same way. I'm walking alone down an isolated dirt road lined with barren fields on either side. The sky is growing dark, the sunset fading to twilight. A chill wind whips across the emptiness, whispering through the dry corn stalks in the fields around me. In the distance stands an old farmhouse, a single light glowing dimly from one of the windows. As I walk closer, movement catches my eye. In the middle of one of the barren fields stands a solitary scarecrow. It wasn't there a moment before, I'm certain of it. The scarecrow is adorned in typical farmer fashion. Patched overalls, a flannel shirt, straw hat. But there's something not quite right about its burlap sack face. The lifeless black eyes seem to follow me as I pass. I quickened my pace, unnerved. The leafless tree branches seem to reach for me, casting grasping shadows that dance in the fading light. My heart begins to pound as the dirt road stretches on ahead into empty blackness. Then I heard it. A faint raspy whisper seemed to ride upon the wind itself. "Come to the pumpkin patch." I whirl around, peering into the gloom behind me. Nothing, just empty fields and the lone scarecrow still watching me from afar. I turn back, moving faster, glimpsing the farmhouse ahead. But the whisper comes again. "Come to the pumpkin patch." This time the voice sounds closer, more urgent. I break into a run, stumbling over rocks and divots in the hard earth. The farmhouse seems to get no closer, always remaining stubbornly in the distance. "Come to the pumpkin patch." Now the whisper is right in my ear, hot, rancid breath raising goosebumps on my neck. I scream and bolt upright in bed, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. Just a nightmare, but the same one over and over. And that whispering voice, it seems so real. Too real. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was trying to send me a message. But that was ridiculous, right? Just an overactive imagination fueled by too many horror movies. Still, I couldn't get the vivid dream out of my head. October rolled around and an evening walk put me on the path winding through the pumpkin patch just down the road from my house, row upon row of plump orange gourds ripe for the picking. Halloween was just a week away. As I passed the small wooden shed near the edge of the patch, movement caught my eye. I froze. It was the scarecrow from my nightmare. Those same patched overalls, the floppy straw hat. Its head slowly creaked towards me on its wooden pole, and I swear I saw a faint glow in its burlap eyes. No, it had to be my imagination. I hurried on, ignoring the prickle on the back of my neck. Probably just a normal scarecrow doing its job, nothing sinister about it. Still, I couldn't help but feel its glowing eyes following me as I left the pumpkin patch behind. That night, the nightmare returned. I found myself on that isolated dirt road again as dusk fell. The empty cornfields surrounded me, and there ahead was the lone scarecrow, seeming to watch my approach. I shivered as its whispered plea echoed once more in my ears. "Come to the pumpkin patch." I woke with my heart slamming against my ribs. What did it mean? Why did the scarecrow want me to return to that place? I peered out my window at the pumpkin patch down the road, a mysterious aura hovering over it in the moonlight. Despite my unease, curiosity nudged me. I had to know what awaited me there. The next evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, I found myself approaching the pumpkin patch. Shadows stretched over the ground, and a damp fog clung to the air. The wooden shed crouched in the distance like a lurking beast. I hesitated at the threshold, peering into the patch. Rows of pumpkins clustered in the gloom, morphing into hunched creatures with toothy grins. Shaking off the unease prickling my skin, I stepped forward onto the muddy path between vines. The further I walked, the thicker the fog became until I could only see a few feet in any direction. The muted orange shapes of pumpkins emerged from the pall-like floating apparitions before disappearing once more. I stumbled over ridged vines and slippery mud puddles, unsure where I was headed. Then suddenly through the gloom, I glimpsed a figure ahead, a dark upright silhouette capped with the unmistakable slant of a straw hat. The scarecrow. It stood between the rows, half obscured by fog. My breath quickened. I paused, warring with myself. Every sensible fiber of my being said to turn back, but that insistent curiosity drew me forward. As I approached, I realized with dawning horror that the Scarecrow's head was slowly turning, following my movement. Swallowing hard, I stepped closer. Its burlap face became visible, shadowed indentations forming glowing eyes, and a yawning mouth twisted into a gruesome leer. My heart jammed into my throat as recognition hit me. This was no ordinary Scarecrow. Fear rooting me in place, I watched its jaw unhinge impossibly wide as an eldritch wail erupted from its throat. The terrible cry seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Before I could react, gnarled vines burst from the earth, lashing themselves around my wrists and ankles. I thrashed wildly, but the tendrils held fast, threatening to drag me down into the mud. A raspy cackle emanated from the Scarecrow's sack head, its eyes flaming red and furious. It raised a claw-like hand, ancient straw spilling from its ragged sleeves. Desperate, I twisted towards the shed, crying out for help. But as I gazed with horror at the small structure, the door creaked slowly open. From within the darkened interior, 2 pinpricks of glowing light fixated on me. A second Scarecrow emerged. Its burlap mouth also stretched into a gruesome rictus as it came shambling towards me. I screamed then. I screamed long and loud. When I finally ran out of breath, the sound seemed to hang in the fog, muted and dead. The grip of the vines had loosened during my struggle, and with a tremendous effort I wrenched myself free. Stumbling through the tangled pumpkin patch, I fled for my life, hearing the wails of the Scarecrows pursuing close behind. Their ragged claws lashed out from the fog, inches from catching hold of my shirt. I never looked back. Not until I was safe inside my home with the doors locked and curtains drawn. Even now I can't escape the feeling that something is out there, lurking in the shadows, peering from dark windows and around corners, watching and waiting for its chance. I close my eyes, but all I see are those glowing eyes and gnashing jaws hungry for my soul. Maybe others will just think I'm crazy, hallucinations or something. But I know what I saw. Whatever evil lives inside that pumpkin patch, it's real. And there are some places people were never meant to go, thresholds that should never be crossed. Because sometimes ignored warnings exist for a reason, and curiosities are best left unexplored. I'm moving far away the first chance I get. But I had to write this all down as a warning. Stay away from the pumpkin patch. Stay as far away as you can. Or you might find yourself wandering foggy paths to nowhere while dead things wait to rip your screaming soul apart. Please listen to me. Stay away. Just stay away. And pray you never have to look upon those Scarecrow's glowing eyes. I know I shouldn't have done it. I should have just listened to my instincts and left that horrid mask sitting on the dusty shelf of the dingy thrift shop where I found it. But it called to me. The way its empty, soulless eyes seemed to follow me around the store, its crooked, too-wide grin daring me to bring it home. I wish I could say I hesitated before grabbing the sticky tag off the shelf and bringing it to the front counter. That sense of foreboding or unease gave me pause. But the truth is, I didn't think twice. It was October, almost Halloween, and I was just looking for a cheap mask to wear to my friend's party. This disturbing jester mask with its mottled, moldy latex and frayed red yarn hair seemed perfect for scaring people, and it was only $5. I peeled off the price tag and paid the bored cashier, who handed it to me in a grimy plastic bag, without even glancing at it. That should have been my first warning. I got home and examined the mask more closely, noticing details I had missed in the dim thrift shop lighting. The rough hand-stitched seams along the cheeks and forehead, the yellowing around the eyes and mouth, which gave it an almost human skin tone. The more I looked at it, the creepier it became. But that was good, right? Halloween was all about being creepy. So, I set it on my dresser and went about the rest of my day. As the sun went down and darkness gathered in my bedroom, I could feel the mask watching me. Those large, glassy eyes track my every movement. The macabre smile beckoned to me. "Come on," it seemed to say. "Let's have some fun." Still, I pushed away my unease. It was just a mask, after all. A silly disguise for Halloween. The night of the party came. I slipped on the mask, adjusting the thick elastic band to fit snugly around my head. Immediately I was hit by a musty, earthy smell, like standing in the middle of a dense forest after heavy rain. The yarn hair tickled my cheeks, and I had to adjust the eye holes to see properly. What struck me most was the tightness of the latex against my skin. It felt clingy, almost sticky, like it was adhering directly to my flesh. The more I moved my facial muscles, smiling, frowning, scrunching my nose, the more the mask seemed to mold itself to me. I shook off my discomfort. It was time for the party. I finished getting costumed and headed out the door into the brisk October night. Under the flickering streetlights, I caught glimpses of myself in the car window. The mask had changed in the dimness. It looked even more grotesque, almost alive. The grin now seemed to stretch wider across the face, the eyes peering out, predatory. But it had to be my imagination, right? Just shadows playing tricks in the darkness. At the party, my costume was a hit. People gawked at the freakish jester mask, asking to try it on themselves. I laughed off their pleas, making excuses about hygiene. I was reluctant to admit even to myself that I didn't want to take it off, that I couldn't take it off. Something about the clinging latex against my skin kept me from peeling it away. Each time I worked up the nerve to try, I became overwhelmed by a wave of anxiety. My hands froze halfway to my face, unable to complete the motion. So, I left it on, plastering a smile over my growing worry. As the night wore on, I felt myself disappearing. Only the mask remained grinning ghoulishly back at me from every reflective surface. Conversations swirled around me that I could no longer follow. My responses came automatically, as if the mask itself was speaking for me, with some sinister interior knowledge. What was happening to me? I needed air. I stumbled out the back door into the moonlit yard, gasping through the suffocating latex. Out there, alone in the shadows, I gripped the edges of the mask and pulled. Pain like nothing I've ever felt lanced through my face. The mask clung stubbornly to my skin, the rubbery cheeks seeming to be fused to mine. Peeling it back was excruciating, as if the latex itself had become grafted to my flesh. I yanked my hands away with a scream, crumpling to my knees as racking shudders seized my body. When I looked up, I found myself staring into the window of the house. The reflection gazing back made my blood turn to ice. The mask stood out in perfect, horrifying detail against the darkness, a mere shell hiding emptiness underneath. All traces of my former self had vanished. There was only the mask now. Its crimson grin gleamed in the moonlight, regarding me with a look of malevolent satisfaction. I clawed frantically at the rubber, peeling it from my skin in bloodied strips as I howled into the uncaring night. But no matter how much I ripped and tore, my features were gone. Only that haunted, hungry mask remained, clinging obstinately to what it had claimed. I have no face now but this, no life left but its desires. I sit here watching you all quietly. You cannot see the emptiness lurking behind this painted grin, but it sees you. Its hunger never ceases. Do not let its stare linger too long upon you, or you may find yourself stripped away too until only it remains. I know I shouldn't have done it. I'm normally not the type of person to make impulsive purchases online, especially when it comes to creepy antiques. But there was something so alluring about that photograph on the auction site, something magnetic that drew me in. The jack-in-the-box looked ancient, the thin wooden box stained and scratched. The clown head with its grinning red lips and wild green hair faded and chipped. The seller said it dated back to the early 1900s and still worked, though the song might sound a bit warped and strange after all those years. I had to have it. Without thinking, I put in a bid and won the auction a few days later. When the package arrived on my doorstep, I tore it open eagerly, casting the wrapping aside. The moment I lifted the lid off that worn old box, I knew I had made a mistake. There was an unsettling aura about the jack-in-the-box, like a shadow clinging to it. The clown's eyes seemed to follow me. Its plastic smile was somehow more evil than cheerful. Winding the rusty handle made the box wheeze and gasp with the effort, the old gears grinding. I hesitated, box resting in my hands, then curiosity got the better of me. Taking a deep breath, I wound the handle completely and waited. The song started slowly, a warbling, disjointed tune that sounded like a demented ice cream truck melody. Each note sent chills down my spine. Suddenly, the song ended with a twang from the aged spring inside the box. I held my breath, but nothing happened. Laughing at myself, I set the jack-in-the-box down on my office shelf as a conversation piece. It must not work anymore, I reasoned. Just an eerie antique. Nothing more. I went to bed that night without a second thought. I awoke hours later to the sound of faint, tinny music. Bleary-eyed, I peered into the darkness of my room. A thin sliver of light glinted off the jack-in-the-box as the handle slowly turned by itself. The same haunting song played, echoing through the still night. I pinched my arm hard, convinced I was dreaming, but the sting felt terribly real. Fascinated and fearful, I watched the handle continue winding until the last warped note faded away. The clown didn't pop up. The song simply started over from the beginning, the box endlessly spinning itself beside my bed. I tried everything to make it stop. Grabbing wrapping paper, I smothered the box to muffle the sound. Still it played on, the music seeming to seep right through. I shoved the thing in my closet and shut the door, but the tune carried on, faint and muffled, but no less creepy. Exhausted and unnerved, I passed out just as the pale dawn light crept into my room. The music had stopped at last. That evening after work, I cautiously approached the closet. Taking a deep breath, I threw open the door, but the jack-in-the-box sat silent and still once more, just an old toy. Forcing a laugh, I shook my head. The long hours at work must be getting to me. I found myself jumping at small noises that night as I tried to fall asleep. The house settled and creaked around me in the darkness. Some neighborhood critters scampered across the roof overhead. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, ears straining, but the jack-in-the-box remained silent. When the music started at 1:13 a.m., my blood turned to ice. That slow, warped song drifted through the house as the box wound itself up alone in the closet. I clutched my blankets to my chest, my pulse racing. Somehow, impossibly, the jack-in-the-box was playing again. I squeezed my eyes shut and begged for it to stop, trying to block out that horrible tune. What had I brought into my house? The song played on, echoing down the hallway toward my room. I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing a hammer from my garage, I stormed to the closet with shuddering breaths. The box sat waiting for me on the shelf, the song winding down at last. Gripping the hammer tight in one hand, I reached for the jack-in-the-box with the other. The handle suddenly jerked in my grasp as the mechanism engaged once more. I reacted on instinct. Before the first notes could play, I smashed the hammer down on the box again and again. Wood splintered. The clown head caved in with a sickening crack. Springs and gears spilled across the closet floor until the jack-in-the-box lay in pieces at my feet. Silence rang in my ears. Nursing bruised hands, I swept the ruined mess into a garbage bag and hauled it outside to the curb. The trash truck would come in the morning. It would all be gone soon. I prayed the music was gone with it. That night I dozed in fitful bursts, dreams filled with warped songs and leering clown smiles. Something creaked outside my door. I jolted upright, heartbeat thundering. The noise came again from the hallway, like rusty gears grinding. Sliding from bed, I crept toward the sound on trembling legs. The shadowy figure stood hunched before me, a slender clown with gnarled hands and glowing eyes. It cranked its own head round and round in an endless circle, producing the grinding squeaks that woke me. The painted smile split wide in a rictus grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth beneath. Frozen in terror, I watched it wind its head faster and faster until, pop! The head burst free in a spray of ink-black blood, bouncing and rolling right toward me. Darkness swarmed my vision. I felt myself falling as manic laughter echoed all around. I woke up covered in sweat. Sheets twisted tight around me. Sunlight streamed through my window. Just a nightmare, I told myself firmly. Just a nightmare. But as I staggered out of bed on coltish legs, I noticed the closet door hanging open. Cautiously, I crept forward, lungs tightening with fear. Drops of dried black liquid speckled the shelf and floor, trailing out into the hallway where my horrified gaze landed on a crumpled cardboard box. Scrawled across the packing slip were two words that stopped my heart. Delivered, 1:13 a.m. I couldn't understand how or why just yet. But as I stood shaking in the morning sun, The sound of rusty gears turning drifted from somewhere within the house once more, and I knew with dreaded certainty that the music was far from over.